10 years ago, if you would have told me I'd be devoting my life to studying nutrition, I would have laughed in your face. But since I've grown up, I've learned just how important proper nutrition is to a quality life. Hi, my name is Addie Brinkley, and I'm a sophomore here at Virginia Tech majoring in human nutrition, foods, and exercise. By the end of this presentation, you will be able to understand and identify the four overarching dietary guidelines for Americans, as well as the guidelines for each stage of life. These guidelines will be applicable to yourself currently, yourself in the future, or to a family member. Published by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the Dietary Guidelines for Americans outlines dietary recommendations for people at all stages of life to promote health and prevent disease. Now let's take a look at the four overarching guidelines. So our first guideline that we have here is to follow a healthy dietary pattern at every life stage. The second is to customize and enjoy nutrient-dense foods and beverage choices to reflect personal preferences, cultural traditions, and budgetary considerations. So nutrient-dense foods are foods that are lower in calories but higher in vitamins and minerals. The DGA, or Dietary Guidelines for Americans, provides a framework of nutrition guidelines that are meant to be customized. Number 3 is to focus on meeting food group needs with nutrient-dense foods and beverages and to stay within calorie limits. Nutrient-dense foods tends to be lower in calories, added sugar, and saturated fat and sodium, so it's a good idea for our diets to be mostly composed of these foods. And lastly, number 4 is to limit foods and beverages higher in added sugar, saturated fat, and sodium, and to limit alcoholic beverages. Some more specifics are less than 10% of calories should be from added sugar starting at age 2, and less than 10% of calories should be from saturated fat also starting at age 2. For sodium, we want to keep our intakes below 2,300 milligrams per day for adults and even less than that for children under 14. If adults choose to consume alcohol, they should try to limit it to 2 drinks per day for men and 1 drink per day for women. And this information was found from the USDA. Now that we've covered the 4 overarching guidelines, let's get into the specific recommendations for each stage of life. Here on this slide, you can just find an infographic displaying the 4 overarching guidelines, and this image is from the USDA. So now looking at infants and toddlers and children and adolescents, we have our first recommendation that for about the first 6 months of life, we should be exclusively feeding infants human milk. And if human milk is not available, we should be feeding infants iron fortified formula. We also should be providing infants with a vitamin D supplement beginning soon after birth. At about 6 months old, infants should be introduced to nutrient-dense foods to complement human milk. And the role of this is to introduce infants to potential allergens and to introduce a variety of foods, specifically prioritizing foods higher in zinc and iron. Infants should be fed human milk till at least 12 months of age. From 12 months through 24 months, we should encourage toddlers to consume a variety of nutrient-dense food low in added sugar and sodium. For toddlers no longer receiving human milk, our calorie patterns are going to range from 700 to 1,000 calories, and there are going to be corresponding food group needs. Overall, children and adolescents are recommended to follow the 4 overarching guidelines, and we will see calorie patterns ranging from 1,000 calories for around females of age 2 up to adolescent boys needing up to 3,000 calories per day. And a specific consideration for children and adolescents is that they tend to consume more sugar-sweetened beverages and just added sugar in general, and to consume less dairy. So we really want to be working with them to reduce the added sugar intake and to increase their dairy so they're getting the proper vitamins and minerals for this crucial stage of life. So now this slide shows an infographic showing various calorie patterns and the corresponding food group needs, and this graphic is also from the USDA. So now we're going to take a look at our adult populations. This includes general adults, older adults, pregnant, and lactating women. So pregnant and lactating women have increased calorie needs. The increase in calorie needs is dependent on their pre-pregnancy weight. So what this means is that underweight or normal weight individuals will need to gain more weight than an individual with overweight or with obesity. Pregnant and lactating women should meet their increased calorie needs with nutrient-dense foods. This is from the USDA. Pregnant and lactating women should consume 8 to 12 ounces of seafood per week because it supports cognitive development in young children. And I found this information from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Pregnant women should take a prenatal supplement, but stop when they start lactating. Older adults should consume nutrient-dense foods and keep their portions in check because calorie needs decline with age. Older adults should consume a high-protein diet to prevent the loss of lean muscle mass, and older adults may want to consider taking a vitamin B supplement because their ability to absorb vitamin B12 declines with age. So for the general adult population, we should work with them to increase fiber, calcium, and vitamin D, and this is to prevent osteoporosis and to protect bone health. We should also work with them to decrease intakes of added sugar, saturated fat, and sodium to prevent chronic disease. And this information is from the USDA. This infographic here will show, again, various calorie patterns for our adult populations and the corresponding food group needs. You should now be able to identify and understand the 4 overarching dietary guidelines for Americans, as well as the guidelines for each stage of life: infants and toddlers, children and adolescents, and adults and older adults, and pregnant and lactating women. These guidelines are applicable to yourself currently, yourself in the future, or to a family member. Here are my references. Thank you, and I hope you now understand just how critical proper nutrition is to a high quality life.